good? What's good? Welcome back to another video. As y'all can tell, we are currently on the roll, but we still gotta get these reactions out. Today we are back on the educational ish. Now, I'm trying to do things a little bit differently, trying to switch up the subject matter, you feel me? And as somebody who's kind of tapped into the film industry as a film student, XYZ, I wanted to do something a little film related, you feel me? So this video here is called Why CGI is So Bad. Now, we've already covered the downfall of the film industry, and I just kind of want to go through where CGI has gotten bad. Now, with all of our technology, we should be in a place where CGI should be better than ever, but also we are starting to rely a little bit too much on AI, you feel me? So I really want to see where things are. Oh! I really want to see where things are, how things are going, and where they are at. Let's get it. Let's go. What makes CGI bad?
Superman! Can we ask you some questions?
Superman's mouth, Doctor Strange's eye, MODOK's floating head, Axel's floating head, exploding Yelena, ice skating Flash, and Black Adam looking like a thumb. What do all these shots have in common? They're universally ridiculed for having terrible visual effects and CGI. But have you ever stopped to wonder why? In this video, let's look at some of the most infamous shots in DC and Marvel movies and analyze exactly why they stuck out so much. Let's break them down, fix them up, and by the end of it all,
Fix
maybe
them
get to
up.
the bottom
Okay.
of the age-old question: what makes CGI bad? First, let's start.
Okay,
with
so
Superman's mouth.
correction,
It baffles me to this
y'all.
day why
This
DC
is
chose to
not
put
this is not gonna be about why CGI is so bad now, but more so what makes CGI bad. So what's a good CGI versus what's a bad CGI?
their most glaring visual mistake at the very start of the movie. You see, Henry Cavill had already finished filming Justice League, but when DC wanted him back for reshoots, he couldn't shave off his mustache because Mission Impossible Fallout wouldn't let him. So DC had the impossible task of recreating the entire lower half of his face. Compared to this, creating a supervillain like Steppenwolf is easy, since he's already fully CG. It's also straightforward to create a living, breathing CG human. But the moment you start to mix the top half of something with the bottom half of something else, you're gonna run into problems. Because human faces are the one thing each and every one of us sees on a daily basis. Now, I'm not looking at Henry Cavill every day, but a quick image search brings up all these pictures, and right away, you can see that he has this huge smile. But here, they never let him smile all the way. He rests in this in-between place, never committing and just freaking us out, honestly. It's too blurry, washed out, and a little red. Just to experiment, let me bring one frame into Photoshop. All I'm doing is sharpening it a bit, upping the contrast, and shifting the colors. Even though the lip shape still isn't right, already it looks a little more integrated. So how did this slip through the cracks and end up on IMAX screens all over the world? Well, poor planning, a rush deadline, and DC biting off way more than they could chew. Now on to 2021's Black Widow. It's a bold move, making an entire movie about a character who already died in another movie 2 years earlier. Is bold the right word? But the one shining light was the fun new addition of Yelena.
Honestly, I never watched this movie, and I ain't gonna lie, I really want to watch it. I feel like she's a very good fighter, and it would make for a really good action movie.
Ugh, that was disgusting.
And when she wasn't talking about pockets for hours, she was spunky, sassy, and stopped the sinister soldiers with the ultimate self-sacrifice.
Don't do it! This was fun! No!
Now, this can be broken down into two parts.
Club.
The first is the painfully obvious blue screen.
Yeah.
It's great when you have a physical set to shoot on that the actors can jump around in. But when a location is just too far, too expensive, or too fantastical, we need green and blue screen to create that vision. So what went wrong with these shots? Well, let's break it down into layers. The background is a blue cloudy sky. Then there's some black smoke, Yelena on top of that, some embers floating by, and finally, more black smoke on top of everything. And it's that final layer of smoke in the foreground that ruins the shot. It only reads on screen over Yelena, so she just turns super dark and muddy, and it leaves behind an obvious edge that looks unnatural. You might say, come on,
seen that
no
off
one's zooming
rip.
in that close. But watch what happens when I shrink this shot down. It looks even more cut up. The second part of all this is the idea that a person can just peacefully blow away like a Forrest Gump feather from a raging explosion. This is what should have happened. Am I right? Of course, I've never stood next to a blazing inferno. Couldn't tell you exactly what would happen to me. But all this shot does is to remind you how there's zero stakes. How Marvel wanted her alive just to plug her into the next Disney Plus show.
Hi.
Called it! And speaking of things that didn't matter, let's get into Doctor Strange's third eye. Ooh. For the life of me, I'll never understand why Marvel did this. Set up a cliffhanger in the mid-credit scene, just to resolve it in the post-credit scene. But I will admit, the third eye here is probably the least offensive on this list. Why? Because on a technical level, it works. If you were to pause at any point and zoom into the eye itself, it looks identical in color and sharpness to the other two, right under it. As he ducks out towards the end, the motion blur matches on every frame. The eye sits on his face in a way Superman's upper lip never could. Sure, there's no eyebrow, which is the main thing throwing me off. Would it look better with an eyebrow? Oh, kind of. It makes me think of Fallout when we meet this guy for the first time, who, due to random mutations throughout hundreds of years, ends up with one eye. To see the process they went through to make this visual effect work, it's obvious that they approached it technically in all the right ways. And as viewers, we need to be open-minded enough to admit that there's a difference between bad CGI and CGI that just didn't work for me. After all, it's a comic book movie. People flying everywhere, giant monsters running around, and a little eye on a forehead gets you mad? So is this bad CGI? No, not really. Does it take a little time to get used to? Yes, absolutely. But after Multiverse of Madness, the piggies were eaten good, because Love and Thunder released just 2 months later. And the one thing people absolutely hated, besides the screaming goats of course. Sorry to do that to you. I know we all still have GTSD. The one thing that people brought up as the worst example of CGI throughout the whole film happened here.
Astrid, are you okay?
I no longer go by the name Astrid. I'm now known as Axel.
If you were lucky enough to watch this movie in theaters, you might have caught Marvel's first attempt at this effect. But as they often do, they redid the CGI for DVDs and Disney Plus. If you compare the two, you'll see that with months to fix it, all they did was add a smudged out yellow aura around him and crank up the chromatic aberration. For those of you unaware, chromatic aberration is what happens when a camera lens can't focus all colors of light to the same point, resulting in areas of an image where we see red, green, or blue outlines. In almost every visual effect throughout comic book movies and TV shows, you'll always see it in some way or another, and in small doses. It works, but when it's pretty much the only thing they rely on, that's where things fall flat. And the fact that this entire effect exists simply to have this back and forth about the name Axel.
Axel.
Astrid.
Axel.
Astrid.
Axel!
You got time for this? Aren't you locked up in a cage? In space? How are you all breathing, by the way? And the shame here lies in how great Love and Thunder could have been. Like for the shadow monsters on the black and white planet, did you know they had kids draw what scared them? And then the CG team recreated lifelike versions of them? I'd watch an entire movie just about these guys. There were good ideas being thrown around, but a few shots could have used a little more time in the oven. Or maybe floating heads were never meant to look right. Now let's check in with Black Adam. As the bad guys are getting away, he flies up to catch them, resulting in this unfortunate moment. I always think of Casper, where Bill Pullman uses a plunger on Stretch's nose. Same energy. The problem here is that the whole movie is trying to sell you on the idea that Black Adam is bigger than life. His backstory, his introduction, all these shots where we see him hovering like a savior, they want you to think of him as some mythical figure akin to the Greek gods. But even though this entire sequence does take place high in the clouds, when the director pointed the camera straight at the Rock's face, it made him look a little less imposing. And if that wasn't bad enough, he's also changing the focal length, warping the perspective, and emphasizing the disconnect between head and body. You can imagine they really wanted this to be a badass moment, but unfortunately, it had the opposite effect. After being dragged through a rice paddy, we the audience end up feeling more distant than ever to the anti-hero we're supposed to connect with. And so, in a movie meant to change the hierarchy of power in the DC universe, we were left with this, an everlasting image of the hubris of The Rock.
A great job.
I ain't gonna lie, that's another movie that I haven't watched yet, and that one was just on some like The Rock be doing too much sometimes in terms of like I just heard he tried too hard to like take over DC, and it just kind of threw me off in terms of like just wanting to watch the movie in general.
Now we venture into the quantum realm. I had high hopes for this movie. Remember the trailer? That ominous Kang voiceover where he talks to Scott about making up lost time? That didn't happen. The serious tone making you think someone was gonna die? That didn't happen. But the biggest disappointment was how they handled my boy MODOK. It's hard to say exactly what would have been the right approach to a giant floating head, But what they tried here didn't exactly work. Their first mistake was going fully CG. The actor for Darren Cross, Corey Stoll, was there. He was physically on set, instead of shooting all his scenes with a big cutout, then trying to use facial capture to graft his performance onto a CGI face. They could have had him do his scenes next to the other characters on set. Then they could have cut out his head, blew it up, and then add all the CGI on top of that. Still would have looked horrible, but at least this would have been someone the audience was familiar with, instead of this weirdo. By making him fully CG and squashing his facial features down, occasionally forgetting to animate him, but we'll let that slide, we were left with an unrecognizable monstrosity that was hard to connect with. On paper, that's probably what they wanted MODOK to be. But by filming the actual actor, it might have been a little less of a distraction, and in a movie with quite a lot of distractions, that would have been great. And finally, let's talk about 2023's The Flash. It's tricky bringing this movie up, because while it's pretty much unanimously hated for its double-berry deepfakes, cartoony-looking babies, and CG recreations of actors they could have just shot anyway, I thought there was a great underlying story there about guilt, regret, and making peace with the things you can't change. But people don't seem to remember any of that. What they do remember, though, is this shot. Honestly pains me that this whole sequence couldn't have been better, so let's go into the many reasons it wasn't. First is the jarring transition of going from a fidgety, and I mean fidgety Barry Allen, to a robotically smooth CG model. I've seen behind the scenes footage of how he actually ran on set. Look at all the subtle, jerky ways his arms move around. By completely replacing all of that with this, just shows it for what it is, a run cycle animation. And it's not just the movement of the shot, but his texture. Just moments ago, we zoomed in super close to his face, all the imperfections of his skin, the determination in his eyes, to now just a lifeless husk as the camera rotates around. On top of all that, the environment he's running through suddenly becomes super empty. Just look at all the passerby in these shots. Nowhere to be found here. It's a problem the CGI struggled with too, and the Spider-Man games. People just vanish. I get that it's time consuming to create a populated city, but just plant a few hundred colorful blobs here and there. They don't even have to move. The fast camera would make you believe they are. Now let's take a look at frames like this, and this. Notice how the glow from his lightning onto the ground is completely smooth? Right before he took off, look at how the cracks in the pavement still show up. It planted him firmly into the scene. By neglecting that connection for these wide shots, it makes this CG city feel even more smooth than it already is. And as far as his feet gliding across the ground, well, it was either that or this. They did have this shot later in the movie that explains how his feet end up gliding, but by then, the damage was done, and this one shot became the lasting image of the whole movie. Look,
that was pretty bad, I'm not gonna lie, I remember that.
There's a reason the credits after every comic book movie are 1,000,000 miles long. For every teeny tiny name you're not even looking at because you want to check Instagram while you're waiting for the mid-credit scene, there's a person behind it. Someone with a family. Someone who spent days, weeks, or even months on a single shot. So with this much time and care put into these movies, you'd think that bad CGI wouldn't really happen anymore. But with audience demands getting higher and movie studios paying lower, they can and they probably will for a long time to come. All we can do is to better understand what makes CGI bad, but maybe have a bit more compassion for the artists behind the pixels. Anyway, thank you for listening to me ramble. Hey, subscribe if you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video.
So honestly speaking, from my own perspective, the only CGI that I saw, like the only movie that I saw that I remember having bad CGI was Flash. And then watching this video back, the only one that I really saw was like that bad was the Black Widow one. Like that girl explosion was kind of insane, I'm not gonna lie. But aside from that, like the Superman mouth thing, like you wouldn't really notice unless you're really like locked in, right? Same with the other ones. Like I really don't think the other ones are too bad. Like you were saying, like the head was not crazy bad. The Thor thing was not terrible, but I think that, like he said, when the demands go up and time goes down, they kind of get to a point where they need to put out what they put out, and they gotta hit certain deadlines. So I mean, like he said, we just gotta have more compassion and be more forgiving. Like not all the CGI is terrible. Like I said, you know, there are a couple examples there that were a little bit rough, but you know, overall, I think they're not too bad. You feel me? But let me know what y'all think about the CGI and the effects that you be seeing in the movies lately. Do you think it's getting better? Do you think it's getting worse? Do you think production studios are becoming lazy? What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments down below.
I'm getting gritty on these niggas. I'm getting gritty on these bitches. Here we go, another talking again. I'm getting gritty on these niggas. I'm getting gritty on these bitches. Here we go, another talking again. I'm getting gritty on these niggas. I'm getting gritty on these bitches.